Okay, we're on air now, guys. So everyone wave.
Hello.
I don't think people can see you, to be honest, but I'm just thinking. I think they can probably just see my screen.
Screens, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the PowerPoint. Yeah.
What I'll do, I'll just to prove that there is actually um, people here. If everyone gives a bit of a wave.
Perfect.
Hello.
There we go. Hello.
There we go.
Opening.
Good evening.
Fantastic.
And now I'll go back to screen sharing.
Terrific.
Perfect. So hi everyone, and welcome to this first module that we're going to try and do in advance of the EYP UK Alumni Training Weekend this year. We're going to try and have some online training, and the way that that will be done is through online Google Hangouts. As I have just demonstrated, I am joined in my Hangout right now by Joanna, Kevin, and Matthew. I'm not 100% sure whether you can still see their faces right now. I'm not sure, but just I'll show you. Here's Matthew, here's Kevin, and here's Joanna, just to prove that they are actually here. So the idea of this is that to save time at the Alumni Training Weekend, and also to allow people who can't go to the Alumni Training Weekend to join in training, is that we'll have some online modules like I'm about to demonstrate here, which you can join as a participant in the Google Hangout, so that you can ask questions of the trainer and to get yourself trained. If you can't make the time that the module is actually happening, for example, right now, the only 3 people who've been able to make it are Matthew, Kevin, and Joanna. So that's why it's being recorded, and it will be put online for everyone else to see afterwards. So this will all be extensively explained also on the Google Drive that we will be using for the Alumni Training Weekend. So without further ado, we're going to get into our first module, which is going to be delivered by all 4 of us, Matthew, Kevin, Joanna, and me, who you start. But yeah. Anyway, so this module is called the basics of chairing. So it's like a very simple basic module, which is basically just to try and illustrate how these modules will work. The future modules will be a bit more specific in what they're actually about. But yes. Oh, that didn't really work, did it? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Slide now. So what we will cover is we'll cover the very basics of chairing. We'll talk about very briefly about what happens in team building, committee work, and resolution checking. Then we'll also talk a little bit about general assembly, closure, and maybe interacting with other teams, but I'm not really sure what that is at the minute. But yeah, we'll see. Matthew Kane's got himself a pen ready to take some serious notes, learning from the best. Here we go. Okay, so what is a chairperson? These are just a few words that some people throw out about what a chairperson actually does. They're a leader, they're a knowledge bank for the committee, they keep time, they solve conflict. Teachers, in other words, some people have used, or an organizer, and also keep the committee energized. Anyone, any comments so far?
I think you've covered the vast majority of them there. Yeah, I think Energizer is a hugely important one, depending as well on the length of the session. But yeah, fantastic. Timekeeper can sometimes be a little bit, that responsibility can be shifted around onto delegates, but that depends on your chairing style, of which there are many.
Yes, it's a very good point by Matthew, actually, in that both in your own perspectives and the perspectives that we will give in this training module and in other training modules, it is always just the perspective of that individual. So there's no need to like turn around and go, oh, but I heard from somebody else that you do it differently. There are lots of different perspectives and lots of different ways of doing things. And all we seek to do in a training module is present our own perspectives. Okay, what's next? Let me see if I can get the, oh, this is bad. Oh, here we go. Hey. So very simply, the 3 words that I would use to describe the role of a chair are to facilitate, educate, and motivate. So firstly is to facilitate, allow the committee to bring out their own knowledge and to function properly as a team, to educate, to in that regard fill any gaps in the knowledge of the committee, and then finally to motivate, as Matthew has just highlighted, through providing sufficient energy to the committee if they're a bit down. Anyone, any comments?
Yeah, no, just to jump in there, Peter, I suppose one of the main areas that we find with chairing is the facilitation of what the delegates do. It's very important to realize when you're chairing, particularly for the first time, that the output that the delegates have isn't necessarily a reflection upon you. It's something there for them to learn from that experience and feel what their strengths and weaknesses are. And you're just there to, I suppose, be part of that as such.
Perfect. Okay, so I used that opportunity to change slide whilst you all weren't looking, so it wouldn't go wrong this time. But now we move on to team building. So as you may have experienced as a delegate, team building usually happens at the start of a session. Delegates start by not knowing anything about each other, and your job as a chair is to bring together a fully functioning team in a very short period of time. This is in some ways, it's quite unnatural what we do in UIP. We try and create a fully functioning team with very little time, which is not a very natural process. If you look at businesses or something like that, teams are usually built over a much larger period of time, and it is quite unnatural what we do in UIP, and that's why we do have the very set structure of how we kind of approach team building, and we use it to accelerate the process of building a fully functioning team. Sophie Duffield used to always say that the role of a chair was analogous to that of a doctor, in that their role is to kind of diagnose problems with how the committee is functioning and to then kind of fix them through games as the interventions that they do to try and improve the atmosphere in the committee. And ultimately, it's about working out what works best for your committee so that it is functioning well as a team. It's also important to make sure that you don't push people too far. As you can see on screen right, there is a diagram of the famous comfort zone, stretch zone, panic zone picture. So the idea is to push people out of their comfort zone and into the stretch zone, but not to push them so far as that they end up in the panic zone, which is not what you want to do, because then they'll not be bringing their full participation, and yeah, just won't really function part of a team. Any comments there?
Yeah, no. Oh, sorry. Want to go on there, Blunt?
No.
No, I was just going to say, it's an interesting point that you brought up there, Peter, is that it worked out what works best for that particular team, because that's often something that's very misled, I suppose, is you start to compare how your committee is doing to other committees while chairing. And it's very important to recognize that what dynamic you have in your team or in your committee is a certain dynamic, and that may be different depending on the different delegates that you have over time. So just make sure that you don't compare yourself or get stressed out with that when chairing, especially at a session with multiple different committees. Over to you, Peter.
Perfect. In which case, we can move on to committee work, which I have defined in this slide as the process of guiding your committee through understanding the topic, eliciting problems, and developing complementary solutions. There are lots of different methods of structuring committee work, but that is kind of the end goal. The different methods and ways that you can approach committee work will be the subject of further modules in this training program, so we'll not delve into them now. Or more simply, the aim is to have lots of really good clauses that are really relevant and that have been agreed to by all of your really enthusiastic and knowledgeable delegates. So that is what committee work is in a nutshell. You can, on screen right, you can see a picture of kind of what goes into a resolution. So you have the introductory clauses, which are generally the problems, and the operative clauses, which are generally the solutions. But as you can see, there's also other things that can be in an introductory clause or an operative clause. For example, an introductory clause can have facts and stats. It can recognize previous achievements. It can recall theory, whilst operative clauses can also include opinions or recommendations for other people to act. So that's just a very brief overview of what the process of committee work involves. Does anyone have anything they want to contribute?
Yeah, just briefly on that, this is definitely the nuts and bolts of what, how to form a resolution and how to get, the committee through the process, to get to the end product. But also to be conscious of the fact, and this will probably be a discussion of a future module, is just to look at that what we do in EYP is not just necessarily about churning out a product that is a resolution, but also the process and the self-development and emotional development of the delegates over the committee work period also has to be factored into this process.
Completely agree.
Over to you, Peter.
Perfect. In which case we move on to, guess what, Kevin?
Resolution checking and not typing.
Yes, resolution checking. Woo. Yes, so this happens after team building committee work. If you've never been an official at a session before, you're probably not very familiar with what actually happens at resolution checking, and it can be a source of some concern for first-time chairs. This is a chance for you to check that your delegates' work is correct and robust. It is not an opportunity to rewrite the resolution for your delegates and input your own ideas. It's merely a chance for you. It's about quality checks and the resolution itself is something that should have been written by your delegates in committee work, and this is just a chance to get input from the rest of the team on your resolution to ensure that it is as best as it can be. And it's also something that should be finished up nice and quickly before 9 o'clock, at which stage everyone goes to the pub. Anyone anything to
add? Yeah, I suppose your last point, I suppose necessarily, I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna just ignore that last point. But so in general, it's the resolution typing or checking, as Peter has rightly put it, is something that you have to realize that the resolution is not a reflection upon you as the chairperson. At the end of the day, it's making sure that you get the delegates' views and opinions across correctly and coherently, so that they can be debated in the General Assembly the next day, which we'll talk about later. But it's not there to academically improve or trying to alter what we do, what the delegates have done. So don't feel too stressed about it in terms of what the ideas that they have are not that fantastic. It's not that. You're just reflecting what you did or what they thought of is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been in a situation whereby the resolution that was created had a clause which was not it wasn't strange. It was quite, it made perfect sense, but it was perhaps somewhat a little bit misguided or lacked some specifics. And in the process of that, it was very easy to take the temptation to change a small part of that resolution to make it a touch more logical. Try and steer away from that, even if your committee then proceeds to the General Assembly and is formed to bits or whatever. That still is in itself part of that process of character development, which is so crucial to EYP. I'm certain no resolutions are torn to bits, definitely, but certainly it is still part of that self-development process.
Perfect. Now, here we go. Am I going to get the next slide? Yes, yes. So now we move on to General Assembly. I've still got Matthew's beautiful face on the screen here, so I better switch back to General Assembly. So yes, this is not an opportunity to take a nap. It is a very important part of a chair's responsibilities. Your responsibilities do not end after resolution checking, as some people seem to think that they do. They do not. The delegates really depend on you to empower them with confidence and to give them the strength to kind of make their points and give the best representation of themselves as possible in General Assembly. It's also your responsibility to try and encourage as many delegates as possible in your committee to have their say and to try and get them to contribute. As you can see, I've written this for a particular session where there was lots of delegates and only one day of GA. So therefore, if that's the case, it's important that you make sure that you're rotating who's speaking and that it is not always the same delegate speaking at once. On the other hand, perhaps if you're at a session where there's not very many delegates, it's going to be harder to kind of, you're going to be encouraging them to come up with more and more points if they don't have lots of points. Does anyone have anything they want to add here?
No, I think well said there, Peter. I suppose just to, as conscious of the fact that, you know, the chairs may be tired from the night before after a long session and reso checking, you know, also you have to be conscious of the fact that after a 3 or 4 day session that the delegates are also could be tired, and to manage their energy throughout the day by making sure that all of the delegates are involved in the committee and trying to, you know, think of points, write position speeches, generally engage with the debate is also very important. So make sure you don't lose some of the delegates that are on the outside of, say, the row that you're sitting in, you know, alternate them around, make sure that you do, make sure that everyone is paying attention as much as possible. Anyone else? Anything to contribute?
I think you've kind of covered it really there. I think there's always certainly the worry. It depends very much at the session you're at and the length of the session, and indeed if it's a session where you are abroad, which I've heard will be covered in a future training module, so keep an eye out.
Ooh, how exciting!
But yeah, just definitely do respect GA. I think the night before GA, there is certainly a bit more of a tendency for that to be seen as a bit of a kind of blow off night, and certainly when you finished resolution checking, that, you know, that is legitimate to some degree because it can be a difficult process, can be quite a tiring process, but it is still important to not, you know, be up at God's hour, so that you're not absolutely knackered in the middle of a general assembly.
Yeah. Coffee does not equal sleep.
Yes. Coffee does not equal sleep. One of the worst things about this organization. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, and it's a lot of like just leading by example. When you active chair in GA, if you're like paying attention to the debate, then your delegates are more likely to as well. So you just need to encourage them by leading by example. And if you get them to, like, if you chat to them about the debate and you get them to engage, then you're going to have more chance that all of them will contribute and pay attention as well.
Do you reckon I could give like a module on like energy management, but like self-energy management? You know what I mean? Like keeping yourself cool on the session. Be quite funny.
I've no doubt the loyal listeners are looking forward to hearing that module.
Well, we'll say I'm not making any promises.
Podcast, Peter. I look forward to that.
Oh, I could do a podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, where are we now? We're on closure. Which comes at the end of the session, surprisingly. This is a chance to allow delegates to reflect. Hopefully you've made a close-knit team in the short period of time. But like, again, as EYP is a bit weird, it's more than likely that they'll probably never see each other again, to be brutally honest. I mean, some of them will see each other again, but like odds are the vast majority of delegates at a session won't see each other again. Depending on what session it is, that's going to vary. But then you need to give them like something to take home. I'm not going to labor this point too much, as it kind of is something to kind of deal with. But it is an oft forgotten about aspect of chairing that sometimes slips by the wayside in introductory chairing modules, which is why it is referred to here. Does anyone want to contribute here?
There's many different approaches to this, really. This one should just be kind of what you feel is best. I've experienced it in many different ways, both as a delegate and as a chair. Now, as a delegate, there's one from Cadel from EYP Deutschland, who is an absolutely lovely woman, and I hope you all have the pleasure of meeting her at some point. But when I was a delegate in her committee at Heidelberg, she encouraged us to all bring postcards from where we were from and then exchange those, and that was some memento. But you don't necessarily have to have a souvenir. It can just be, a friendly goodbye. What have we learned, etc. And that is also fine.
Yeah, and don't stress about it too much either, because so like it depends what type of person you are. If you're not that much of an emotionally aware person, or a person that's good at expressing emotions and things like that, these things of closure can get a bit difficult, because sometimes emotions are quite high at the end of it, especially a long session, and people can be quite emotional. So do try to balance it, but don't try to feel like that you have to live up to the emotional level that's there. Just try to do your best, try to talk it through with them, and just have some sort of game plan going into it, and it should be fine.
Sweet. So then we come to interacting with other teams. Yeah, I mean, so I think this slide was made with like the specific session that this PowerPoint was initially made for. So I'll just briefly say that, of course, like when you're at a session and you're a chairperson, that you should try and interact with as many different teams as possible. You shouldn't just like stick within the chairs team. Likewise, you shouldn't form any cliques of like only hanging out with people that you've been to sessions before with. You should always try and like expand your horizons and talk to people from other teams, and be respectful and courteous to all teams at all times. Then it says, remember that the organizers I don't know what that's trying to say. But the organizers are important people. It's probably saying like, remember that the organizers are very busy, and that the be all and end all of their day is not whether you need more post-its or not. They've got bigger fish to fry, as it would be. Anyone want to jump in here and see?
Yeah, I'll say it there, Peter. Basically, what a good point to take away from this is, and it's something that has kind of died out in the network, thankfully, a small bit, but it's still there to a certain extent, is that the chairs feel like there's sort of a hierarchy as such, and they're above the media team, organizers, or jury, if there's jury at the event. And that's definitely not true. It's the task that we do is only one small part of a larger session that's happening. It's very important to kind of recognize when you're a chair that yes, you're in a chair's team, but you're also in a larger session team of officials. And it's very important to make sure that you do engage with everyone in the other teams, and just try to be, as Peter said, be as courteous and be polite to everyone's there. And just generally be a nice person, because everyone is under a lot of different levels of stress. And if you map out the energy levels of how people at different roles at the session have, their energy levels are different at different times. So you have to be very conscious of that as well. When the chairs are very stressed, the organizers might not be, but when the chairs are relaxed, the organizers may be quite busy. So be conscious when approaching other people that they may be very much more busy than you are currently. So just to bear that in mind. Yeah.
Quite good hearing that we have quite a good mix, in the sense that I know, Joanna, you've done all sorts of stuff, but that perhaps more media team and chairing. Kevin, I know you've done more chair work, and then with myself, it's more jury. Kind of having said that, with reference to jurying, very much there are the common approach tends to be that jury are kind of put off to the side and shouldn't interrupt or impact on it. That's perfectly fine. But as a chair, you do have a degree of kind of autonomy of what you want to do with that. If you want to involve your juror, I think that is usually perfectly reasonable, but do just be aware that they have a rather difficult job of trying to give individual feedback for every single delegate at a session, which is easier or harder depending on the size. The Madrid RS, it was me and 2 other jurors trying to give feedback to something like 54 to 60 individual delegates. So definitely, if you want to have your jurors involved a bit more, that's fine. But do try and establish that relatively early on in the piece, if at all possible.
Mm.
Awesome. So my last slide just says questions. Obviously, given that none of you managed to join the training, given that you didn't actually know that it was happening, there aren't any questions, but just to highlight that in these modules, there are 3 ways of then asking questions, in that you can come to the module and you can ask questions like during the module, interrupt the trainer, or at the end of the module. You also have the option of sending in your questions in advance to the trainer so that they can prepare to answer your question. Or if you're not joining the training itself but watching it back, you can also post a question on Slack, and then the trainer will be able to answer your question. Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
No, I suppose just to finish off there, Peter, to say that we're very open to questions, and no question asked is a question that shouldn't be asked. Because if you're thinking the question, no doubt other people are, and we're very open, and we're very conscious of the fact that a lot of the stuff that we say, we fall very quickly into acronyms and into jargon that may not necessarily be that clear at the beginning. So even on that kind of level, when we're talking about things, please do stop us if we're just talking in a way that it's not that clear what we're talking about. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, and on that as well, that's why we'd really encourage you, obviously you're all very busy as well, but to try and join the Hangout as it happens as well, as much as you possibly can, because that is the best way to actually interact and ask people on questions on the Hangout. Just to highlight as well that although the Hangout is recorded, there is time before and after the Hangout where it's not recorded, so you can also have the chance to ask like other questions, but preferably if they're like content related, we'd record them so that other people can benefit from them, as Kevin said. But just that it is a really useful learning experience to actually join the Hangout as it happens, and not just to rely on watching the Hangout back.
I just want to add one thing, just in regards to chairing, not in regards to the Google Hangouts, just because this is something always pushed over, especially from the during the early stages of being an EYP UK alumnus, is that EYP UK is relatively unique in its regionals, in that we don't have that committee work process. We only have GA. Abroad and everywhere else, generally speaking, bar I think the Netherlands and Cyprus, where they have GA days, the structure of regionals is also like nationals. So if you want to apply to be a chair somewhere, you can apply for those regionals, and it isn't the same as the UK, where you are only a juror. Or
which will be the subject of another module from myself and Joanna. Ooh,
amazing,
when to decide to apply to a session.
So,
yeah, come see me, it's fun.
Okay.
Full recommendation for our session.
Hey.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Anyone else, anything else to add?
That's great looking hair. You just keep it blonde.
Matthew King's hair is getting compliments here, people.
Far too kind. Far too
We'll put a poll out on that on Slack. See what the masses think. But with that, then we shall conclude this first training module, and we shall see